My name is Went Ethan Caldwell. I was 34 years old when my own brothers fired me from the company our father built with blood, sweat, and 30 years of sacrifice. They did it in the main conference room, not quietly, not respectfully, not like family. They sat across from me in tailored suits, with legal folders on the table, cold coffee beside them, and the kind of smiles men wear when they think the battle is already over. My older brother Grant leaned back in Dad's old leather chair like he had already inherited the throne. My younger brother Mason stood near the window with his hands in his pockets, looking down at the parking lot like he was too important to look me in the eye. And between them sat our company lawyer, Mr. Bell, sweating through his gray suit because even he knew this was wrong. Grant cleared his throat. "Ethan," he said, using that fake business voice he only used when he wanted to sound smarter than he was, "this is not personal." That was how I knew it was deeply personal. Mason finally turned around and smiled. "We've decided the company needs a new direction." I looked at both of them. "A new direction?" Grant opened the folder. "As majority board representatives, Mason and I have voted to remove you from your position as operations director." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Not because I didn't understand the words, because they sounded impossible. I had been running Caldwell Manufacturing since Dad's stroke. I had kept the doors open when our biggest client almost walked away. I had negotiated supplier contracts, fixed production delays, rebuilt the warehouse system, and covered payroll twice from my own savings when cash flow got tight. Grant came in late, left early, and liked giving speeches about vision. Mason spent more time posting photos from business lunches than reading actual reports. But me? I was the one on the factory floor at 5 a.m., the one answering emergency calls. The one employees came to when machines broke, orders failed, or customers threatened to cancel. And now my brothers were firing me. From Dad's company. From the company I helped save. I slowly placed both hands on the table. "Does Dad know?" Grant's expression flickered. Just a little. That tiny flicker told me everything. Dad did not know. Or if he knew, they had not told him the truth. Mason spoke before Grant could answer. "Dad is recovering. He doesn't need stress." I almost laughed. "Then why are you destroying his company?" Mason's smile disappeared. Grant's voice hardened. "Careful." "No," I said quietly. "You be careful." The room went still. Because for years I had been the brother who fixed things without making noise. The brother who cleaned up problems. The brother who swallowed insults because Dad always said, "Family stays together, Ethan." Family. That word had trapped me for most of my life. But that morning, sitting across from my brothers while they tried to erase me from the company I had protected, something inside me shifted. Grant pushed the termination letter across the table. "You'll receive a severance package." I looked down. 3 months' pay, a non-compete clause, a confidentiality agreement, and a line stating that I was leaving voluntarily due to strategic restructuring. I looked back up. "You want me to lie?" Grant adjusted his cuff. "We want this handled professionally." Mason smirked. "Don't make it ugly." Those 4 words. Don't make it ugly. As if ugly had not already walked into the room wearing my brothers' faces. I picked up the pen. Grant relaxed. Mason looked satisfied. Mr. Bell avoided my eyes. Then I placed the pen back down without signing. "No." Grant blinked. "What?" I said no. Mason stepped forward. "You don't have a choice." I stood. The chair scraped against the floor. "I have more choices than you think." Grant's jaw tightened. "If you walk out without signing, you lose the severance." "Keep it." "You'll lose access to company systems." "Fine." "You'll lose your title." I looked at him. "You already took the title. You were never capable of taking what made me valuable." Mason scoffed. "You really think this place can't run without you?" I smiled then, not because I was happy, because for the first time that morning, I understood something they didn't. They had confused my silence for weakness. They had confused my loyalty for dependence. And worst of all, they had confused themselves for leaders. I walked to the door. Grant called after me. "Ethan?" I stopped but didn't turn around. "You're making a mistake." I looked back at him. "No," I said. "You are." Then I walked out of Caldwell Manufacturing with no job, no severance, no office, and no idea that within 8 months, the same brothers who fired me would be sitting across from me again. Only this time, they would not be offering a termination letter. They would be begging me to save them. But to understand how we got there, you need to understand what Caldwell Manufacturing really was, and what my brothers never understood about the man who built it. Our father, Robert Caldwell, did not come from money. He came from a one-bedroom apartment above a closed bakery, a mother who worked nights at a hospital laundry, and a father who disappeared before Dad turned 7. Dad started working when he was 12. Paper routes, gas stations, construction cleanup, anything that paid. By 25, he was fixing industrial equipment in other people's factories. By 32, he had saved enough to rent a small warehouse on the edge of town. That warehouse became Caldwell Manufacturing. At first, it was just Dad, 2 machines, 3 employees, and a handwritten sign on the door. They made custom metal parts for local farms and repair shops. Nothing glamorous, no fancy investors, no big contracts, just honest work. Dad used to say, "A company is not built by the man whose name is on the sign. It's built by the people who show up before sunrise and stay until the job is done." When we were kids, he took all 3 of us to the factory on Saturdays. Grant hated it. He complained about the smell of oil, the noise, the dust, the heat. Mason liked it only when employees paid attention to him. He would sit in Dad's office chair, spin around, and say, "One day this will all be mine." Dad would laugh. I didn't. Not because I wanted it more, because I understood earlier than they did that the factory was not a toy. It was responsibility. I liked the floor. I liked watching raw steel become useful. I liked the rhythm of work, the forklifts beeping, the machines humming, the way older workers could tell something was wrong just by the sound of a motor. While Grant chased popularity and Mason chased attention, I followed Dad around asking questions. Why that supplier? Why that machine? Why that customer? Why reject that order? Why take a smaller profit on this client? Dad always answered me, sometimes with words, sometimes by making me sweep floors until I learned the lesson myself. By 16, I knew the names of every machine operator. By 18, I could read production schedules better than most supervisors. By 22, I had finished community college at night while working days in the plant. Grant went to a private university and came back with expensive shoes and a degree he mentioned every chance he got. Mason dropped out after 2 years, but told people he left because school was too slow for his ambition. Dad gave them both office roles because they were his sons, but he made me earn mine. I used to resent that. I don't anymore, because earning something teaches you its weight. Being handed something only teaches you how to drop it. Grant became head of business development. That sounded impressive. Mostly, it meant he took clients to lunch, promised things we could not deliver, and expected operations to make his lies come true. Mason became brand and strategy manager. That sounded even more impressive. Mostly, it meant he changed logos, redesigned brochures, posted online, and held meetings where he used words like scale, innovation, and market disruption, without once asking whether the machines could keep up. I became operations director. That meant, if Grant sold impossible timelines, I fixed them. If Mason launched a campaign before inventory was ready, I absorbed the chaos. If a client was angry, I called them. If a machine broke, I called maintenance. If maintenance couldn't solve it, I got under the machine myself. For years, I told myself it was fine. Dad saw the truth. That mattered. At least, I thought it did. Then Dad had his stroke. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was on the factory floor checking a delayed order when my phone rang. It was Dad's assistant, Marie. Her voice shook. "Ethan, you need to come upstairs." I ran. Dad was on the floor beside his desk. His left hand was twisted strangely. His speech came out slurred. For one terrible second, I stopped being a grown man and became a child watching the strongest person in my world break. The ambulance came. The hospital took him. Grant arrived 40 minutes later, smelling like cologne and coffee. Mason arrived after posting an Instagram story about family emergency, prayers appreciated. I wanted to throw his phone into the wall. Dad survived. But recovery was slow. Speech therapy, physical therapy, frustration, weakness. He hated weakness, not in other people, in himself. I visited him every day. Grant visited when it was convenient. Mason visited when he could take a picture without looking too obvious. Dad noticed. Of course he noticed. But he said nothing. He had built a life on silence around disappointment. With Dad recovering, the company needed structure. Someone had to make decisions. Grant argued that because he was oldest, he should serve as acting president. Mason supported him because Grant promised him more control over branding and sales. I didn't fight them. That was another mistake. I told myself titles didn't matter as long as the work got done, so Grant became acting president. Mason became vice president of strategy, and I stayed operations director. The old pattern continued. They wore titles. I carried weight. For the first few months, things held together. Because I held them together. Then Grant signed the Titan Ridge contract. Titan Ridge was a major agricultural equipment company. Landing them could have changed everything. But Grant promised them custom parts at a volume our current line could not safely produce, and at a price that left almost no margin. When I saw the contract, I called him into my office. "Did you ask production before agreeing to this?" He leaned against my doorframe. "Relax, Ethan. Big opportunities require bold moves." "This isn't bold. It's reckless. You always see problems. That's because you create them." His smile faded. "Careful." I placed the production estimate on the desk. "We need either upgraded equipment or a longer delivery window, preferably both." "Titan won't wait." "Then you shouldn't have promised." He stepped closer. "Dad would have taken the deal." "No. Dad would have negotiated a deal we could actually fulfill." Grant hated that, because Dad's name was the only authority he couldn't fully pretend to own. Mason sided with Grant naturally. He had already prepared a press release announcing Titan Ridge as our largest growth partnership in company history. Never mind that the parts were not tooled, never mind that overtime would explode, never mind that one production failure could ruin us. The announcement went out. Orders flooded in behind it. Employees felt the pressure first. Longer shifts, rushed schedules, maintenance delays, supervisors coming to me with tired eyes. "Ethan, line 3 can't keep doing this." "Ethan, we're short on material." "Ethan, this batch is going to fail inspection if sales keeps pushing changes." I went to Grant again. "We need to slow down." He laughed. "We need to grow up." I stared at him. "These are people, Grant, not numbers on your presentation. That's why you'll never lead. You get too emotional." Emotional. That was what my brothers called me when I cared about consequences. Dad used to call it responsibility. The Titan Ridge order nearly collapsed in month 3. A critical part failed inspection twice. The client threatened penalties. Grant blamed production. Mason blamed communication. I spent 3 nights at the plant with supervisors and machine operators, rebuilding the schedule, changing tooling, personally calling a supplier in Ohio at midnight, and convincing Titan Ridge to accept phased delivery. We saved the contract. Barely. Grant sent a company-wide email praising executive leadership. He did not mention operations. He did not mention the floor team. He did not mention me. The employees knew. That mattered more to me than his email. At least, I told myself it did. But resentment grows quietly when watered daily. Then came the board meeting. Caldwell Manufacturing did not have a huge board. Mostly family, a longtime accountant, one outside advisor, and voting shares Dad had structured years earlier. Dad still held the largest personal share, but while recovering, Grant and Mason used powers of attorney and board influence to consolidate control. I did not fully understand how far they had gone until it was too late. Maybe I should have, but I was busy keeping the company alive. That is the danger of being the fixer. While you're fixing the fire, someone else is changing the locks. Marie warned me first. She had been Dad's assistant for 15 years and knew more about the company than Grant ever would. She came to my office late one evening after most people had gone. "Ethan," she said, closing the door behind her, "something is happening." I looked up from the production report. "What?" "Grant asked me to pull your personnel file." I frowned. "Why?" "He didn't say." "Mason?" "In the conference room with Mr. Bell." Mr. Bell was our lawyer. My stomach tightened. "Did you hear anything?" Marie hesitated. "Just one phrase." "What phrase?" "Strategic restructuring." I leaned back. For a second, the office felt too quiet. Strategic restructuring. That was corporate language for someone is about to get cut, and we want it to sound intelligent. "Maybe it's about supervisors," I said. Marie gave me a look. She had known me since I was 22. She knew when I was lying to myself. "Be careful," she said. The next morning, Grant asked me to meet in the main conference room at 10. I already knew. Some part of me knew. But knowing betrayal is coming does not make it hurt less when it sits across from you. The conference room had glass walls overlooking the factory floor. Dad designed it that way. He wanted executives to see the people their decisions affected. Grant had installed frosted film halfway up the glass because he said it looked more modern. That detail suddenly felt symbolic. My brothers wanted authority without visibility. Grant sat at the head of the table, Dad's chair. Mason stood near the window. Mr. Bell sat between them, legal folder ready. Grant gave his little speech. new direction, leadership alignment, modernization, operational restructuring. Then he fired me. I asked if Dad knew. They dodged. I refused to sign, and I walked out. But walking out of a company is not like walking out of a room. Every hallway held memory. The framed photo of Dad cutting the ribbon on the expanded warehouse, the bulletin board with employee birthdays, the vending machine I had fixed 3 times because maintenance kept forgetting, the floor entrance where I had spent half my adult life. As I walked past the production line, people noticed. They always noticed. Factory workers are experts at reading faces. Luis from line 2 stepped toward me. "Everything okay, Ethan?" I looked at him. Luis had worked for us for 19 years. He had taught me how to listen to a press motor. I wanted to lie. I couldn't. They fired me. The line seemed to quiet around us. A few workers turned. Someone cursed under their breath. Luis stared toward the conference room. "They what?" I forced a smile. "Keep your head down. Don't make trouble." He shook his head. Trouble already got made. By the time I reached my office, half the floor knew. I packed 1 box, not much. A photo of Dad and me beside the first CNC upgrade, a notebook, my old measuring caliper, a coffee mug my daughter had painted for me, even though I didn't have a daughter in this story. Wait, no daughter. Remove. Actually use niece? Let's keep clean. A coffee mug my mother had given me years earlier with the words, "Measure twice, cut once." That mug almost made me break. My mother had died when we were in our 20s. She had been the only person who could call Dad stubborn and make him smile. She loved all 3 of us, but she understood me best. She used to say, "Ethan carries the roof and apologizes for blocking the sun." I never knew what she meant until years later. Marie came in while I was packing. Her eyes were wet. "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "You don't owe me sorry. This is wrong. Wrong doesn't always lose immediately." She looked at the door, then lowered her voice. "Take copies of your personal records." "I don't have access anymore." She placed a flash drive on the desk. "I pulled what belonged to you. Performance reviews, project notes, Titan Ridge communications where your name appears, supplier correspondence you authored. Nothing confidential that would hurt the company, but enough to prove what you did." I stared at her. "Marie, your father would want you protected." That almost broke me. I put the drive in my pocket. "Thank you." She hugged me quickly, then left before either of us could say more. When I walked through the lobby, Mason was waiting. Of course he was. He wanted the last word. He always did. "Don't take this too personally," he said. I stopped. "You helped fire your brother from Dad's company." He smiled. "You were holding us back." I looked at him for a long moment. Mason had always been good-looking in a polished, empty way. People liked him at first, then they worked with him. "You know what's funny?" I said. "What?" "You think I was the wall." He smirked. "You were." "No," I said. "I was the foundation." Then I walked out. The parking lot was bright with late morning sun. Too bright. The kind of bright that feels disrespectful when your life has just changed. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, breathing. I thought about calling Dad. Then I remembered Grant saying Dad didn't need stress. That was their shield now. Dad's recovery, his weakness, his distance from daily operations. They could do anything and call it protection, but I needed him to know. So I drove to his house. Dad lived in the same brick home we grew up in, 10 minutes from the plant. After Mom died, he never remarried. He said once that he had already had the only wife he wanted. His caregiver, Paula, opened the door. "Ethan?" she said, surprised. "He's resting." "I need 5 minutes." She saw my face and stepped aside. Dad was in the sunroom, sitting in his recliner with a blanket over his knees and a therapy ball in his right hand. He looked thinner than before the stroke, older, but his eyes were still sharp. "Ethan," he said slowly. His speech had improved, but some words still dragged. I sat across from him. "How are you feeling?" He gave me a look. The old dad look. The one that said, "Do not waste my time with soft questions when something is wrong." "What happened?" I swallowed. "Grant and Mason fired me." His hand stopped squeezing the therapy ball. For a moment, only the clock on the wall made sound. Then Dad said, "No." One word, flat, heavy, true. I nodded. "This morning, conference room. Mr. Bell was there." Dad's face reddened. Papers? I didn't sign. His eyes closed briefly. Not relief. Pain. Then he whispered, "They told me you were stepping back." There it was. My chest tightened. They lied. Dad opened his eyes. Anger burned there, trapped inside a body that did not obey him the way it used to. I had never seen anything more painful. He tried to sit forward. His left hand trembled. "Call Grant." "Dad, don't call him." I took out my phone. Grant answered on the third ring. "Ethan, this is not a good... It's Dad." Silence. Then Grant's tone changed. "Put him on." I held the phone near Dad. Dad's voice was rough. "What did you do?" Grant said something I couldn't hear. Dad's face hardened. "No." Another pause. Dad gripped the armrest. "My company." Grant spoke longer this time. Dad's eyes flicked to me. Then he said with effort, "You lied." I heard Grant's voice rise faintly. Dad closed his eyes. His breathing changed. I took the phone back. "That's enough." Grant snapped, "You ran to Dad? Really?" I told him the truth. "You're going to hurt his recovery." "No, Grant. You are." I hung up. Dad sat silently. His right hand shook. I wanted to fix it. That was my instinct. Fix the machine. Fix the schedule. Fix the client. Fix the family. But some things cannot be fixed by the person who keeps absorbing the damage. Dad looked at me. "Don't let them make you small." I swallowed. "They already fired me." His eyes sharpened. "Job small. You not." That sentence stayed with me. Job small. You not. I drove home that evening with no plan. My apartment felt strange, quiet. I had spent so many years working late that being home before dinner felt like trespassing in my own life. I opened the fridge, closed it, sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, closed it. For the first time in years, nobody was calling me about a machine failure, production delay, angry client, or supplier issue. The silence should have felt peaceful. It felt like falling. The next morning I woke at 4:30 out of habit. No alarm. My body still belonged to the factory. I made coffee, sat at the table, stared at the wall. At 5:12 my phone buzzed. Luis, then Marie, then 3 supervisors, then a number I didn't recognize. Messages came in quietly at first. "We heard what happened. This is wrong. Grant says not to contact you, but I wanted to say thank you for everything. Line 3 already has problems. Nobody knows the adjusted schedule. Titan Ridge called asking for you." That last one made me sit up. Titan Ridge, the contract I had saved, the client Grant claimed as his win. I did not reply. Not yet. I needed to be careful. No severance meant no non-compete signed, but I still had ethics. I would not sabotage Dad's company, no matter what Grant and Mason had done. That mattered, because revenge without principle turns you into the people who hurt you. Still, by noon, the phone calls became harder to ignore. A supplier called. "Ethan, I know you're not there anymore, but Caldwell's purchase order is wrong again. Do you know who's handling alloy sourcing now?" "I can't manage that for them." "I know. Sorry. It's just, you always knew." Then Titan Ridge called. Their procurement director, Elaine Porter, had worked closely with me during the crisis. "Ethan," she said, "I just received notice you're no longer with Caldwell." "That's correct. Should we be concerned?" I paused. Careful. "I can't speak for Caldwell leadership." "That's not an answer." "It's the only professional one I can give." She was quiet, then said, "You saved that contract." "My team did." "You led the team." I said nothing. She continued, "If you land somewhere else, call me." That was the first seed. Not a plan yet. A seed. For 2 weeks, I tried to find a normal job. Operations roles, manufacturing management, plant director positions. I had interviews, good ones. But something felt off every time. Maybe because I was not just looking for work. I was looking for proof that my brothers had not taken my future. One evening, Marie called from her personal phone. "Are you sitting down?" "That sounds bad." "It is." "What happened?" "Grant changed the Titan Ridge schedule again." I closed my eyes. "Why?" "He wanted to show improved efficiency." "Without testing line capacity?" Silence. "Marie?" "He also approved Mason's new marketing timeline. They're promising early delivery on the next batch." I stood from the table. That's impossible. I know. They'll burn out the line. I know. They'll fail inspection. I know. Why are you telling me? Her voice softened. Because people are scared, Ethan. I walked to the window. Outside, evening traffic moved calmly, like the world had no idea how stupid my brothers were being. I can't interfere. I'm not asking you to. What are you asking? Start something. I almost laughed. What? You heard me. Marie, I was fired 2 weeks ago. Yes. I don't have capital. You have trust. Trust. The word hit harder than I expected. She continued. Employees trust you. Suppliers trust you. Clients trust you. Your brothers have the building, the machines, and the logo, but you have the thing your father actually built. What? Credibility. After we hung up, I sat with that word for a long time. Credibility. Grant had authority. Mason had title. Caldwell Manufacturing had machines. But credibility? Maybe that had walked out with me. The next day, I called Elaine at Titan Ridge. Not to steal business. Not exactly. I told myself it was only a conversation. She answered immediately. Ethan Caldwell. Elaine, you said to call if I landed somewhere else. Did you? Not yet. Are you starting something? The question was too direct. I looked at the notebook on my table. I had written 3 words on the first page. Independent Operations Consulting. I'm considering it. She said, Good. That was all. Good. Then she added, We need an outside audit of our small supplier network. Production reliability, process risk, delivery feasibility. Could you do that? I could. How soon? I looked around my apartment, at the kitchen table, at the old laptop, at the box from my office still sitting near the wall. Immediately. That was how Caldwell Process Solutions began. Not with investors, not with a grand opening, not with an office, with a kitchen table, 1 laptop, my personal records, and 1 client who trusted me more than my brothers understood. I registered the business 2 days later. Caldwell Process Solutions. I debated using the Caldwell name. Part of me wanted to avoid it. But Dad had built that name honestly before my brothers turned it into decoration. I would not let them own the meaning of it. My first contract with Titan Ridge was small. A process audit, supplier risk review, delivery systems analysis, boring words, valuable work. I gave Elaine a report that did not flatter anyone. 3 suppliers were overpromising, 2 were underdocumented, 1 had strong capacity but poor communication. Titan Ridge implemented my recommendations and avoided a delay that would have cost them far more than my fee. Elaine referred me to another company, then a packaging firm called, then an agricultural parts supplier. Within 6 weeks, I had more work than I expected. Not enough to feel safe, enough to feel awake. I worked from my kitchen table, then from a rented desk in a shared office above a dentist's clinic. The place smelled faintly like mint and fear, but it was mine. No Grant, no Mason, no frosted conference room glass, no one calling me emotional because I cared about reality. Meanwhile, Caldwell Manufacturing started to crack. I did not celebrate. At first. The first missed delivery hit Titan Ridge, then a quality issue, then overtime costs spiked, then 2 supervisors quit. Luis called me one night. I can't stay, he said. I understand. No, Ethan. I mean, if you ever need someone. I closed my eyes. You'd leave Caldwell? I already left. That hurt. Not because Luis wanted to work with me, because Dad's company was losing the people who made it real. Grant and Mason probably saw labor numbers. I saw names. Luis became my first hire. Not full-time at first. Contract basis. Then came Renee from quality control. Then Mark from scheduling. Then a maintenance specialist named Owen. I did not poach them. I never called first. They came because they were tired of being ignored by men who thought leadership meant sitting higher. We worked out of a small rented industrial unit by month 3. 2 offices, 1 meeting room, a workshop area, bad lighting, cracked concrete, a garage door that jammed in cold weather. To me, it looked beautiful. We were not manufacturing full products yet. We were consulting, auditing processes, designing workflow systems, and helping small manufacturers avoid the exact disasters Grant created daily. But then, opportunity arrived, wearing the face of crisis. A local farm equipment company had an emergency. Their supplier failed. They needed a small batch of precision brackets within 2 weeks, or they would miss their own delivery. Caldwell Manufacturing had turned them down because Grant said the margin was too low. The owner called me because one of his managers knew Luis. "Can you make them?" I looked at Luis. Luis looked at Owen. Owen looked at the old machines in our workshop. Then Luis said, "We can if we don't sleep much." I took the job. We made the brackets. Everyone passed inspection. The owner paid on delivery and told 3 other people. That was the second seed. Maybe Caldwell Process Solutions was not just consulting. Maybe we could build too. But differently. Lean. Honest. No impossible promises. No vanity contracts. No executive lies handed down to exhausted workers. I wrote our operating rule on a whiteboard. Promise only what the floor can deliver, then deliver better. Everyone laughed at how simple it sounded. Then we lived by it. By month 5, we had 10 employees. By month 6, 14. By month 7, we moved into a larger facility. Not huge, but clean, organized, ours. We specialized in short-run custom manufacturing and process rescue projects for companies burned by bigger suppliers. We became known for telling clients no. That sounds like bad business. It became our strength. When a client asked for an impossible timeline, I explained the real one. When they pushed for cheap materials, Renee showed them failure risk. When they wanted vague estimates, Mark gave them detailed schedules. Some walked away. The good ones stayed. Trust grew. Fast. Then came the call that changed everything. Elaine from Titan Ridge. Her voice was calm, but I knew her well enough to hear the tension underneath. "Ethan, we're terminating our expansion order with Caldwell Manufacturing." I sat back. "What happened?" "You probably already know." "I don't." 3 failed inspections, 2 missed delivery windows, incorrect batch documentation, and Grant tried to blame our engineering changes. I closed my eyes. Idiot. "What do you need from me?" "We need the remaining order completed by another supplier." "That's a large volume." "Yes." "We're not Caldwell Manufacturing." "No," Elaine said. "That's why I'm calling." I looked through the glass wall of our small office. Luis was reviewing machine settings with 2 younger operators. Renee was marking inspection sheets. Mark was arguing with a whiteboard schedule like it owed him money. Could we do it? Not alone, not yet. But we could coordinate. Partner, split production, manage quality, deliver honestly. "I can put together a proposal," I said. "How soon?" 48 hours. "You have 24. I smiled despite myself. Still generous. For 24 hours, we worked like the old factory days. But this time, no one lied about capacity. No one blamed the floor. No one promised magic. We built a realistic rescue plan using our facility, 2 trusted partner shops, strict quality gates, and phased delivery. Elaine approved it. Titan Ridge shifted the remaining work to us. When the news hit the industry, Grant called me for the first time since firing me. I let it ring. He called again, then Mason, then Grant again. Finally, a text. "We need to talk." I stared at the message. 6 months earlier, those words would have filled me with dread. Now they made me feel almost curious. I did not reply. The next day, Dad called. I answered immediately. His voice was slower than before, but stronger. "Ethan." "Dad." "I heard." I sat down. "About Titan Ridge?" "Yes." "I didn't steal it." "I know." That mattered more than I expected. He continued. "They lost it." "Yes." Silence. Then Dad said, "And you caught it." I closed my eyes. "Trying to." A faint sound came through the phone. Maybe a breath. Maybe a laugh. "Good." One word. But from Dad, it felt like a hand on my shoulder. Then he said, "Grant wants me to ask you to help." There it was. The bridge. The old family trap. "What do you want?" I asked. Dad was quiet for a long moment. "I want my sons not to destroy each other." I looked around my new office, at the employees working outside, at the company I was building from the ashes of being betrayed. "They fired me, Dad." "I know." "They lied to you." "I know." "They nearly damaged your company beyond repair." His voice lowered. "I know." That was the difference now. He knew. Not guessed. Not suspected. Knew. "What are you asking me to do?" Dad sighed. "I don't know." That was one of the most honest things he had ever said. For the first time, my father did not have a command, just pain. A week later, Grant and Mason showed up at my facility, unannounced, just like men who still believe the world should adjust to them. The receptionist called me. "There are two men here saying they're your brothers." I looked through the office window. There they were, Grant in a navy suit, Mason in a gray one, both looking around my facility with expressions they were trying very hard to control. Surprise, discomfort, maybe even fear. I walked out. Grant smiled first. "Ethan." Mason nodded. "Nice place." I looked at them. "What do you want?" Grant's smile tightened. "No small talk?" "You fired me in a conference room and tried to make me sign away my voice. We can skip small talk." Mason looked away. Grant inhaled slowly. "We need to discuss Titan Ridge." "No. You don't even know what I'm going to say." "Yes, I do." Grant's jaw tightened. "We need cooperation." "You need rescue." Mason snapped. "Don't act like you're better than us." I looked at him. "I'm not acting." That shut him up for half a second. Grant stepped closer. "Caldwell Manufacturing is still Dad's company. And you damaged it. We made strategic decisions. You made promises the floor couldn't keep." Mason said, "Here we go with the floor again." I turned to him. "The floor is why companies exist, not your branding meetings." His face reddened. Grant raised a hand. "Enough. We are prepared to offer a subcontracting arrangement." I almost laughed. "You want me to do the work you couldn't do under your name?" "Under Caldwell Manufacturing's name," Grant corrected. "My company is Caldwell Process Solutions. That name exists because of Dad." "Yes, and I'm trying to make sure it still means something." Grant's eyes hardened. "You owe this family." There it was again. The oldest chain. I stepped closer. "No, I owed Dad honesty. I gave it. I owed the employees respect. I gave it. I owed the company my best work. I gave that for years. What I do not owe is obedience to brothers who fired me because they were too insecure to lead beside me." For once, neither of them answered. Behind them, through the glass, my employees were watching. Luis, Renee, Mark, people who knew exactly what kind of leaders my brothers were. Grant noticed. His face flushed. "We shouldn't discuss this here." "You came here." Mason muttered, "This is pointless." I looked at him. "No, this is consequence." Grant swallowed. "What do you want?" That question again. From men who had never cared what I wanted until they needed me. I looked at both of them. "I want the truth on paper." Grant frowned. "What truth?" "That you removed me without cause. That Titan Ridge's failure happened after my removal. That any subcontracting or collaboration happens under my company name, with my quality standards, my schedule, and my authority over the work." Mason laughed sharply. "You're insane." "No, I'm available at market rate." Grant stared at me like he was seeing someone new. Maybe he was. The old Ethan would have softened the offer, made it easier, protected their pride. This Ethan had payroll to meet and people to protect. Grant said, "Dad would hate this." I held his gaze. "Dad taught me not to promise what the floor can't deliver." That landed. They left without agreeing. But 3 days later, their lawyer called mine, because pride is loud, but debt is louder, and Caldwell Manufacturing was drowning. We accepted a limited subcontract under strict terms. My terms. Grant hated every clause. Mason hated that our logo appeared on documentation. I didn't care. The work came to us. We delivered. Titan Ridge stayed with my company for future process work. Then another former Caldwell client called. Then another. Some came quietly. Some apologized. Some said they had always preferred working with me. That was bittersweet, because part of me wanted to ask why they hadn't said that before. But I already knew. People often admire competence silently until incompetence becomes expensive. By month 8, Caldwell Process Solutions was no longer a little rescue shop. We were a serious competitor. Grant and Mason had fired me to clear their path. Instead, they created the company that exposed how little path they had. And then came the board meeting that changed everything again. Dad requested it. Not Grant, not Mason. Dad. His recovery had improved enough for him to attend in person. I was not technically part of Caldwell Manufacturing anymore, but Dad invited me. Grant objected. Dad overruled him. That alone told me the meeting would not be ordinary. The boardroom looked the same as the day they fired me. Same long table, same frosted glass, same factory floor beyond it, half hidden. Grant sat stiffly. Mason looked irritated. Mr. Bell was there. Marie sat near the end with documents. Dad entered with a cane. Everyone stood, even Grant, especially Grant. Dad lowered himself into the chair at the head of the table, his old chair. Grant had been sitting in it for months. Now he stood beside it like a man caught wearing someone else's coat. Dad looked around the room. His speech was slower now, but every word carried weight. "I built this company," he said, "but I forgot something." No one moved. "I thought leaving it to my sons meant it would survive." His eyes moved from Grant to Mason to me. I was wrong. Grant's face tightened. Dad. Dad raised one hand. Grant stopped. That old authority still lived somewhere. Dad continued. "A company is not inherited by sitting in the biggest chair. It is inherited by carrying responsibility when no one claps." My throat tightened. He looked at Grant. "You wanted the chair." Then Mason. "You wanted the title." Then me. Ethan carried the weight. The room was silent. For years I had wanted him to say something like that. Not publicly, not dramatically, just truth. And here it was. Not fixing everything, but standing in the room. Grant pushed back. "With respect, Dad, you don't know everything that happened." Dad looked at Marie. Marie opened a folder. "I know enough." Documents were passed around. Production failures, missed inspections, client losses, internal emails, the termination process, the fact that Dad had been told I was voluntarily stepping back. Grant went pale. Mason stared at the table. Dad looked at both of them. "You lied to me." Grant said, "We were protecting you." Dad's voice hardened. "From the truth?" Mason tried next. "We were trying to modernize." Dad looked toward the factory floor beyond the frosted glass. "You covered the glass." No one understood at first. Dad pointed with his cane. "I designed this room so leadership could see the floor. You covered it because you did not want to look at the people paying for your mistakes." That sentence hit like a hammer. Grant had no answer. Mason had no clever words. Dad turned to Mr. Bell. "Proceed." Mr. Bell cleared his throat. A resolution was introduced. Grant removed as acting president. Mason removed from executive strategy authority. An interim restructuring committee formed. External audit approved. I was offered a temporary executive operations contract to stabilize Caldwell Manufacturing. The room spun slightly. Grant looked at me with pure hate. Mason looked betrayed. Dad looked tired. I looked at the factory floor, the place I had walked out of, the place my brothers had almost broken, the place Dad still loved. I could have said yes immediately. The old Ethan would have. The fixer, the loyal son, the brother who swallowed pain to keep the roof from collapsing. But I was not that man anymore. So I said, "No." Everyone looked at me. Dad's face changed. Grant almost smiled. Then I continued. "Not under those terms." Mr. Bell blinked. Dad watched me carefully. I said, "I will not return as the invisible son who fixes disasters while others keep titles. If Caldwell Manufacturing wants my help, it will be under a formal contract with Caldwell Process Solutions. My team leads stabilization, full authority over production decisions during the contract period, transparent communication with employees, no interference from Grant or Mason." Grant exploded. "Absolutely not." I looked at Dad. "That's my condition." The room held its breath. Dad looked at me for a long time, then he nodded. "Agreed." Grant stood. "You're handing him the company?" Dad's eyes flashed. "No, I am hiring the man you were stupid enough to fire." That was the first time I saw real fear in Grant's face. Not anger, fear, because he finally understood. The mistake was not that he fired me. The mistake was believing I would stay gone and stay small. The stabilization contract saved Caldwell Manufacturing, but not the way my brothers wanted. We cut bad contracts, renegotiated Titan Ridge penalties, reduced vanity spending, repaired supplier relationships, brought supervisors into planning meetings, removed the frosted film from the conference room glass. That was my first request. The floor became visible again. Employees noticed. Luis stood beside me the day the film came down. "Feels good," he said. "Yeah." Like someone opened the room. That was exactly what it felt like. Grant stayed away from operations. Mason was moved to a limited marketing role under oversight. He hated it. I did not care. Dad attended meetings when his health allowed. Sometimes he said little, sometimes just listened. But he listened differently now. One evening, after a long review, Dad asked me to stay. The boardroom was empty, the glass clear, the factory floor below humming softly. Dad sat in his chair, Kane beside him. "I failed you," he said. I did not know what to do with that, so I stayed quiet. He continued, "I let them mistake noise for leadership. I let you carry too much because you were strong enough to carry it." I looked down. "That doesn't feel like strength when you're the one carrying." "I know." His voice broke slightly. "I know now." For years, I had wanted recognition. Now that it came, it hurt. Because recognition after betrayal is not simple. It is both medicine and proof that the wound was real. Dad said, "I can't undo it." "No. But I can correct the record." He pushed a folder toward me. Inside was a revised succession plan. Caldwell Manufacturing would not pass automatically to Grant and Mason. A portion would be placed into an employee trust, a portion retained by Dad, a portion available for purchase by Caldwell Process Solutions if milestones were met. Grant and Mason's voting control would be reduced. Mine would not be given as charity. It would be earned through formal partnership and purchase. That mattered. Dad understood enough not to hand me what I had already outgrown needing. "I don't want a gift," I said. "I know," he replied. "That is why this isn't one." I closed the folder. "I'll review it." He smiled faintly. "Measure twice." I finished softly. "Cut once." For the first time in years, we both laughed. Small, tired, real. The merger did not happen quickly. It took 18 months. Lawyers, audits, valuations, arguments, angry calls from Grant, silent resentment from Mason, employee votes, client reviews. But eventually, Caldwell Manufacturing and Caldwell Process Solutions formed a new structure. Caldwell Works Group, part legacy manufacturing, part process consulting, part employee-owned production partnership. The old company survived, but not as the kingdom my brothers tried to steal. It became something better, something Dad had talked about in speeches but never fully built. A company where the people who carried weight had a stake in the roof. Grant left before the final restructuring. He called it a strategic exit. Everyone else called it what it was. He couldn't stand not being in control. Mason stayed longer, quieter now. He was not suddenly humble. People do not transform because life embarrasses them once, but he learned to ask before promising. That was progress. One afternoon, almost 2 years after they fired me, Mason came to my office. He stood in the doorway. No smirk, no phone, no performance. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't fired you?" I leaned back. "Sometimes." "What do you think?" "I think I would have kept saving everyone from consequences until it killed me." He looked down. "So we did you a favor?" I smiled. "No. You made a huge mistake. I turned it into a favor." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. It was not perfect. It was not dramatic. But it was the first apology he had ever given me without attaching an excuse. I accepted it. Not because it erased everything, because carrying every unpaid debt of pain becomes its own prison. Grant never apologized. That used to bother me. It doesn't anymore. Some people would rather lose everything than admit they were wrong. That is their punishment. Years later, people would tell the story simply. My brothers fired me from Dad's company. Huge mistake. Then I built my own company and came back stronger. That version is true, but incomplete. The real story is not just that I won, it is that I stopped needing the people who hurt me to admit I had value before I believed it myself. They took my title. I built a company. They took my office. I built a team. They tried to erase my contribution. I made my work impossible to ignore. They thought leadership was a chair. I learned it was weight. And when Dad finally asked me what I wanted, I no longer wanted revenge. I wanted a company where no quiet worker would ever be mistaken for weak just because he was too busy keeping things standing. On the 3rd anniversary of Caldwell Works Group, Dad came to the factory floor for the celebration. He moved slower by then, cane in one hand, my arm in the other. The employees gathered near the main line. Luis gave a speech. Marie cried. Renee pretended not to. Dad looked around at the machines, the people, the clear glass conference room above us. Then he leaned toward me and said, "Your mother would have liked this." That one nearly broke me. I looked at the floor, at the workers, at Mason standing quietly near the back, at the empty space where Grant could have been. Then I looked at Dad. She would have liked the people being seen. He nodded. Yes. That night, after everyone left, I walked through the factory alone. The machines were quiet. The air smelled of metal, oil, and fresh paint. I stopped in the conference room, the same room where Grant and Mason had fired me. The glass was clear now. No frosted film, no hiding. Below, the factory floor stretched wide and visible. I stood at the table and remembered that morning. Grant's folder, Mason's smirk, Mr. Bell sweating, the termination letter, the pen I refused to use. For a long time, I thought that day was the day they took everything from me. But standing there years later, I understood the truth. That was the day they accidentally gave me back to myself. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I was 34 when my brothers fired me from Dad's company. They thought they were removing a problem. They thought I would disappear. They thought the company would finally belong to them. Huge mistake, because they did not fire the weak brother. They fired the foundation. And once the foundation moved, the whole building started to shake.